According to legend, somewhere in Texas lies buried a vast treasure of Spanish gold. At the turn of the 20th century, one man is on a mission to find it. His name is Dave Arnold.
He was obsessed with this legend. He wasn't going to let anything stop him and prevent him from seeking it.
Guided by a cryptic old map, he unearths 3 mysterious stones. Chiseled into their surfaces are web-like pictorial codes.
No one seems to know what it means.
Convinced these rocks are keys to finding the treasure, Arnold begins a 7-year quest. One that leads to a mysterious death, financial ruin, and an ancient curse.
Leave it alone. You'll have nothing but heartache from this.
This is the story of a quest to find a fabulous lost treasure and unravel the mystery of the Spider Rocks. The story begins in 1902, when Dave Arnold arrived in the small town of Haskell, Texas.
Descriptions of them have him as a large, very fat man with striking white hair. Every person in Haskell notices this new person coming into town. What's he here for? Who's he going to see? And what does this man want?
Some say Arnold was a miner, recently returned to the US from Mexico. But it soon became obvious he was in Haskell for a purpose. He was there to find treasure.
Dave Arnold is looking for anything that might have a dollar sign attached to it. He makes no excuse. He lets people know that he is looking for something.
But those who met Arnold later recalled he was guarded about precisely what this treasure was.
We know some of what he's looking for. We don't know everything he's looking for, and I'm not so sure he wants everyone to know what he's seeking.
But Dave Arnold was certain about one thing. The treasure he sought was somewhere in Texas, and it was originally Spanish. For over 130 years, Texas was part of New Spain, a colonial territory which at its height stretched from Central America to Northern California. The Spaniards left behind a rich history of myths and legends related to fabulous lost treasures. And many of these came from their centuries-long quest to find new sources of metals in the Americas.
West Texas country is full of copper. Spaniards were certainly looking for copper. They were looking for lead. Anytime you have those metals, you always have a little gold and silver mixed in with it.
But for Arnold, locating a cache of lost Spanish gold promised to be a huge challenge. In 1902, Texas was the largest state in the US and almost completely wild.
There are no roadways, there are no road maps, there are no highways, there are no automobiles. This is wilderness, and these people, it takes them, a day to travel 15 miles.
Finding lost Spanish gold would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. But Dave Arnold had a secret weapon. A tattered sheepskin map, he believed, was an old Spanish treasure map. It was covered with a variety of strange symbols and landmarks. And Arnold was very secretive about the information it contained.
No one saw the map closely. He didn't allow the map out of his possession. So if others got a glimpse of it, it was only a brief glimpse.
And he kept that map well guarded, including sleeping, with it under his pillow at nights.
Arnold believed his precious sheepskin map led to buried treasure. But he had a problem. He didn't understand many of its cryptic markings and symbols. Luckily for Arnold, there was a man in Haskell who might be able to help. His name was Caleb Terrell.
Caleb LaFon Terrell, he's a druggist in Haskell about 1900, and he has an interest in the flora and the fauna. He had glass showcases full of fossils and all unusual type things that were found in the area.
Evidence suggests Dr. Terrell was interested in more than natural history. He too was a treasure hunter. Like Arnold, he owned a mysterious map covered in bizarre symbols.
Dave Arnold must have looked for Dr. Terrell because he knew that he had a map that had some of the same symbols that Dave Arnold was seeking.
Dr. Terrell had already been involved in a search, at least as early as 1897. Somehow, Dave Arnold discovers that fact, and so Dave Arnold shows up in Haskell, probably to share information with Dr. Terrell of what he knows and what he has, and hoping that Dr. Terrell can share information as to some of the meaning of those symbols.
History does not record exactly what took place during Arnold and Terrell's meeting. But the two men joined forces and began an incredible quest for the lost Spanish treasure. Arnold and Terrell quickly identified a site to search first. An area 20 miles west of Haskell, on the Salt Fork of the Brazos River. The treasure hunters set up camp here in spring 1902. Arnold and Terrell recruited local ranchers to help dig the site and immediately put them to work. For weeks, they shoveled ton after ton of soil. It's probable they uncovered chunks of slag and pieces of copper. All evidence the area was once mined for metals. But they found no trace of lost Spanish treasure.
It must have been frustrating for Arnold to have spent all of this time excavating areas that he thought would be the location of the treasure, and to find that few bits of information are coming out. Very few artifacts are coming out.
The truth was, neither Arnold nor Dr. Terrell could accurately read the sheepskin map's cryptic symbols to pinpoint the lost Spanish treasure.
Dave Arnold can't proceed with anything. He's stumped as to where to go next and what to do next.
Without help, his chances of striking it rich were close to zero. Then Dave Arnold caught a lucky break. His lack of progress had been noticed.
Dave Arnold is being watched. He sees this sheep herder where there really should not be a herd of sheep.
The sheep herder was a Mexican. He and Arnold had a meeting a few weeks into the excavation.
Arnold meets the sheep herder. Sometime in the course of that first conversation, treasure is mentioned.
The sheep herder stated that he knew all about the lost Spanish gold, and that Arnold was not the only person who had worked out where it might be buried.
He tells Dave Arnold that it's not that much of a mystery in Mexico. Certain priests are aware of this site, and he seems to know far more about it than Dave Arnold does.
Reports also state the sheep herder told Arnold something else. He could read the sheepskin map.
Arnold shows the sheep herder the map, and the sheep herder is reading Arnold's map in a way that Arnold never considered, thought of, or possibly never even knew how to read.
The Mexican stated the sheepskin map didn't reveal the actual location of the treasure. It would take them to another map carved in stone. That rock would lead them to the gold. They would know the stone because it would be marked with a very specific symbol.
The Mexican sheep herder is apparently emphasizes that there's a certain hieroglyphic H that needs to be found, which is the clue to solving the mystery.
That immediately strikes Arnold's interest and excites Arnold to the point to where he thinks, I may have a real chance on finding this treasure.
The way forward seemed clear. Finding the stone inscribed with an H would bring Arnold a step closer to uncovering the lost treasure. The Mexican indicated a new area for Arnold's men to excavate. They began removing the stubborn Texas dirt. Soon, one of the men's shovels struck a rock. Arnold brushed away the dirt and carefully lifted away a small, flat stone. Underneath were 3 copper ornaments. One was shaped like a dagger. Another, a strange-looking key. The third was a square with notches cut into its sides. Arnold didn't fully understand what these objects meant. The treasure hunter now brushed away more dirt and revealed an artifact unlike anything he'd seen before. An inscribed stone, covered with Roman numerals, numbers, and curious Spanish letters.
According to the eyewitnesses, this is the most elaborately carved rock that they'd ever seen.
At the center, was a series of concentric circles. And to one side was the distinctive old-fashioned letter H, just as the Mexican sheepherder had described.
Nothing like it had ever been seen by any of the men who were doing the digging. With its concentric lines and various symbols and marks on them, it must have been a sight to behold.
The stone's peculiar web-like design earned it the nickname Spider Rock. It contained no clue as to when it was made or who buried it. But Dave Arnold was convinced that this new discovery held the key to uncovering the lost Spanish treasure.
It's a highlight in his life. It's a major highlight, a major discovery to him. Obviously, he's quite excited about it. He thinks he's on the verge of finding the treasure.
But again, he hit the same problem. Neither Arnold nor Dr. Terrell had any idea how to read the stone's curious hieroglyphics. So they turned again to the Mexican. The sheepherder studied the Spider Rock's mysterious markings. He made a series of strange predictions. Arnold's team would find a stone. Underneath would be human remains. Nearby, they'd discover a huge animal bone and a variety of man-made artifacts.
It seems that Arnold becomes quite excited about looking for them. They may not have gotten to the treasure yet, but Arnold seems to be encouraged.
Convinced these clues were somehow connected to finding Spanish gold, Arnold immediately started digging. Again, one of his men's shovels struck rock. Underneath was a horrifying sight.
They find the cadavers with a great stench. And of course, I'm sure they are mystified as to what this means.
Reports state the Mexican claimed the bodies were Native American slaves whose spirits guarded a fabulous treasure. But that was not all the men found. 19 paces away, they uncovered a giant prehistoric animal bone. And nearby, what appeared to be a pair of silver epaulets, possibly from a Spanish officer's uniform. Everything was just as the Mexican had predicted to Arnold.
It's verification of the truth of the map, because if these things that the Mexican sheepherder told him about on the map are true, then it only stands to reason that the gold is still there as well.
Arnold pumped the Mexican for more information. Where was the treasure? The sheepherder again studied the Spider Rock's cryptic markings and identified one that indicated a small hill. Here, he said, Arnold could possibly find treasure.
Arnold becomes very excited as anyone has ever seen him at that time, and he decides now or never we are going to go find this treasure.
Arnold's team redoubled their efforts and began leveling the hill, cutting through layer after layer of Texas soil.
By the time he's through, he has almost leveled the area known as Spider Rock Hill.
But not everyone was happy with Arnold's methods. It's reported the Mexican sheep herder and Dave Arnold's relationship started to deteriorate.
We're told that the sheep herder was upset when they scraped all that off into the canyon, but he possibly realized to solve this mystery, you need to do it more in an archaeological fashion, piece by piece.
The atmosphere at the dig site changed from naive optimism to deep mistrust. It said Arnold and his team grew suspicious of the Mexican.
Dave Arnold and the group of treasure hunters don't trust what the Mexican's telling them. They think that he's making them dig in places that they shouldn't be digging, drawing them away from the treasure.
Some of the men believed the Mexican wanted the treasure for himself. But before they could confront him with their suspicions, he disappeared.
Where did he go? Why did he leave? Nobody knows for certain other than the fact that Arnold seems very satisfied that he left and does not seem to miss him that much.
The next day, one of Arnold's men made a discovery.
They look over the excavation, and beyond where they had stopped the evening or so before, then they find the impression of a pot in that excavation.
It appeared some pots had been removed recently. Could they have contained the gold they'd spent so long looking for?
Arnold and his team must be thinking that he has removed something of extreme value, and they feel like something wonderful has been found and very valuable. They are probably interested in retrieving that material.
It's now the story took a darker turn. Shortly after the Mexican's disappearance, Arnold's men stumbled upon a body.
The party discover a grisly thing across the river, not too far from the excavation. And it is apparently a decomposed body near some heavy copper pots. And they assume that this is the Mexican sheep herder.
According to reports, the shape of the copper pots matched the impressions found earlier at the excavation site. Both were empty. Arnold's crew began to speculate.
Where did the contents of the pot go? Who took them? And doubt begins to build in their mind. Perhaps Arnold had a hand in this. We don't know. We can't prove it. But perhaps.
No one has been able to solve the mystery of the body by the riverbank. But one thing is clear. Arnold still believed the bulk of the treasure was intact. But with the sheep herder gone, he couldn't decipher any more clues from the Spider Rock. With no new leads, the excavation wound down.
The farmers and the ranchers have neglected their stock, neglected their crops, and they begin to drift away one by one. And it seems that at this point, Arnold himself has come to a dead end.
The treasure hunter gathered up the mysterious spider rock, along with the puzzling metal artifacts, and then disappeared. But Dave Arnold was not done looking for the fabled Spanish gold. In 1905, he reappeared, 70 miles southeast of the Brazos River site, near the tiny settlement of Clyde, and at a ranch run by John and Lucretia Sembritsky.
The Sembrinskys were farmers in Callahan County who originally are German settlers to the U.S. Being farmers, the Sembrinskys probably grew cotton or wheat or vegetables. They probably had chickens and pigs. They're just humble, poor, hard-working American farmers.
The Sembritskys welcomed Arnold into their home. Eyewitnesses recalled that at dinner, he struck up a lively discussion.
During this conversation, Arnold skillfully guides the subject around to strange things. Just how he did this, we don't know for certain, but he appears to have been a master at directing conversation the way he wanted it to go.
The Sembritskys were unaware that Arnold was hunting for information. He wanted the location of specific clues marked on his sheepskin map. 2 entwined trees and a pile of rocks. He suspected both were on the Sembritskys' farm, and that they held the key to uncovering the lost Spanish treasure.
And he begins to ask questions. Did you ever see anything strange around here? Have you seen any trees twisted together?
And Mrs. Sembrisky says, yes, I have seen them in an 80-acre southern part of the ranch. And Dave Arnold gets real excited, and then they get excited.
A short time after Lucretia Sembritsky's disclosure, Dave Arnold found the entwined trees and the pile of rocks. Reports say that he immediately started digging. Late in the afternoon, he made another discovery. An unidentified object just inches beneath the soil.
And he ran as fast as his legs would take him to the Sembrisky house and told him that he had found what he was looking for and please come and help him.
With John Sembritsky's help, Arnold freed the object. It was another spider rock. Carved into one side were puzzling diagonal channels framed by square partitions. Scattered about were what appeared to be numbers, letters, and cryptic symbols. On the other side were 4 concentric circles. The rock was strikingly similar to the one Arnold had found years earlier near the Brazos River site.
What a coincidence. Or is it a coincidence? Could they be tied in? I imagine that the thoughts, the questions racing through Arnold's mind at this time are just staggering.
Later that day, Arnold told the Sembritskys his theory about the rock's purpose.
And the family are looking around in great anticipation. when Arnold starts revealing what he's come there to find and what this stone is telling him that will be found.
It's only now that Arnold finally revealed what he'd been seeking for the past 4 years. The stone was a map to a lost underground city stacked with gold bars.
He is seeking $60 million in gold bullion, Spanish bullion. They had a hidden city, a buried city there, the Spaniards did, and this is where they left the treasure when they had to leave the country in a hurry because of the Native Americans that were attacking them.
$60 million of gold in 1905 would today be worth almost $1.5 billion. Arnold claimed the underground city could only be accessed through a secret tunnel. Find its entrance, and they would find the treasure. The Sembritsky's were amazed and eagerly agreed to allow Arnold to excavate their property.
He was convincing enough, or he showed John Sembritsky something that was convincing enough to make him quit his farming duties and dig for treasure.
If somebody's telling a fantastic story and there's a possibility of a great amount of treasure or gold to be found, you're going to put all your effort into helping this man.
But Arnold didn't tell the Sembritskys the full story. He didn't say he'd dug for treasure years earlier and failed to find the gold. He didn't tell them of his discovery of the first Spider Rock, nor of the Mexican sheepherder's mysterious death.
Arnold is apparently a master at manipulation. He recognizes the desperate need that the Sembritskys have just simply to survive. And he plays upon this. And the Sembritskys fall right into his trap.
The Sembritsky farm dig began in mid-1905. Very soon, Arnold uncovered mysterious artifacts. Strange copper objects, cut into the shapes of daggers and crowns. The similarity to those found at the Brazos riverside was obvious. Whether Arnold knew what they signified is not known. But to him, they were evidence he was closing in on the underground city. And soon, he made a startling discovery. Just beneath the Texas soil, he found brickwork.
Dave Arnold believed that it was the archway, the doorway into the secret tunnel that would lead him to the special treasure room where all the bullion would be found.
Arnold felt sure he was close to striking it rich. He approached his old associate, Caleb Terrell, to finance a full-scale excavation. The pharmacist injected his own funds into the project. Arnold hired local muscle to shift the tons of soil covering the underground treasure vault. And they began stripping the Sembritsky's farm.
He made this 100-square-foot area, kind of like a prairie dog town, just digging randomly wherever he might think he could get into something.
The digging continued at breakneck speed. Even when water started pouring into the excavations.
The only problem is you dig down 29 feet, and the water table at Clyde is about 29 feet. So water fills in the tunnel, and they didn't have scuba diving equipment at that particular time.
But Arnold was not giving up. He ordered holes dug all over the site in a desperate bid to find the underground city.
And at this moment, Dave Arnold is crapshooting. He can't find the way into the chamber that he's seeking.
By autumn 1905, the Sembritsky's farm resembled a battlefield, peppered with deep holes and flooded shafts.
There are holes, excavations, trenches, piles and piles of dirt everywhere made by hand. Shovel, pick, and greed.
But the underground city and the Spanish treasure were nowhere to be found. Dave Arnold was not one for quitting. He now sought help from an unlikely source. The American enlisted a Mexican seer to find the treasure.
I don't think it was at all unusual for Dave Arnold to bring in a clairvoyant. The man was groping for any help he could find.
And this was an age when people did believe in the supernatural.
At that particular time, it is viewed as a gift, and these people have a power to find things that are lost.
The seer communed with a mysterious rock. What he saw horrified him.
He warned Arnold that anyone who sought this treasure would suffer dire consequences, that there was a terrible curse placed upon this treasure.
Leave it alone. You'll have nothing but heartache from this. And that wasn't what Dave Arnold wanted to hear.
To a man like Arnold, the seer's talk of curses and disaster probably sounded ridiculous. But it's then things started to go very wrong. First, John Sembritsky fell out with Arnold.
Dave Arnold turns to the wife, and she begins to spend some time with him. He does have a magnetism, and John Sembritsky recognizes this and becomes jealous. He even accuses Arnold of having an affair with his wife.
And when that sort of thing happens, everything just kind of falls apart.
To make matters worse, evidence from Dr. Terrell's account books suggests the excavation's costs were mounting. Tensions on site rose. Eyewitnesses recalled Arnold arguing with his associates. He even started arming himself.
Dave Arnold was sleeping with his pistol. He'd wear it during the day, and when you're wearing pistols at a work site, you may have problems.
Arnold's dream of finding the lost Spanish treasure had crumbled.
It
was now the end of the road for him at the Sembritsky's farm in Clyde. He gathered up the stone map and all the copper artifacts found at the site. And then he left. The story goes, Arnold later deposited them in the safe at Caleb Terrell's pharmacy in Haskell. Afterwards, he disappeared for a second time.
Dave Arnold was devastated at the trials, the problems that took place at Clyde. But Dave Arnold is not one to give up.
In 1909, Dave Arnold and Caleb Terrell reappeared. 70 miles northwest of Clyde, near the small settlement of Rotan in Fisher County. And once again, they were on the trail of treasure.
He won't take no for an answer. He does not give up. He will not give up.
As with the quests near the Brazos River and Clyde, it's likely they found this site by decoding clues on Arnold's sheepskin map. Historians know very little about the search at Rotan, except that one afternoon, Arnold made a discovery close to a small creek. A third spider rock. On one side were two concentric circles. On the other, bizarre, irregular markings, bisected by two parallel lines. The stone featured intriguing circles and pictograms, just like those on the other two spider rocks. But just as with those stones, their exact meaning and significance was a mystery.
Although some of the symbols are the same, there are new and different symbols, symbols which he cannot interpret. At this point, Arnold is virtually alone, with no one to assist him in interpretation, no one to tell him, dig here.
Dave Arnold's quest had hit the buffers once again. But that is not the end of the story, nor the misfortune that had plagued the hunt for the lost Spanish treasure. In October 1908, Dr. Caleb Terrell had declared himself bankrupt. Funding Dave Arnold's excavations destroyed his family's wealth and likely left him a broken man. Then, on the night of the 7th of May, 1909, his drugstore in Haskell burned to the ground.
Apparently, Dr. Terrell never knew there was a fire. He died about that same night. There's the curse for you.
Inside the safe were two of the stone rocks and many of the metal artifacts found near the Brazos River and Clyde.
And the story was that everything was destroyed. That was the story that was always told. That ended the story. Everything burned up in the fire.
When the Terrell Pharmacy burns, it seems to be the end of the road for Arnold. If at any other time in his career he thought about a curse, this must have been the crowning curse of all.
Historians know very little of Dave Arnold's quest following the Haskell drugstore fire. Evidence suggests he continued his search around Texas. but he failed to find the treasure he sought. Arnold died in 1911. But was the treasure hunter's quest a waste of time? Had there ever been anything out there to find? The answer may lie in the objects that Dave Arnold unearthed. His excavations found evidence of copper smelting, parts of a Spanish officer's uniform, and the possible remains of buildings. Some historians believe this leads to an obvious conclusion.
All the evidence points to lost Spanish mines in the early 1800s. They were seeking copper and they were seeking lead. They had to have lead for the bullets and copper for the vessels. And whatever those stone maps relate to relates back to the mining sites.
One theory is that the stone maps are elaborate markers the Spanish left behind to help them one day relocate their valuable mines. If this is true, there exists no stash of gold, only rich veins of copper and lead ore. But other historians believe the mysterious rocks Dave Arnold unearthed point to the existence of a more valuable prize.
The treasure definitely exists. Nobody goes to that much trouble by accident. Why make these elaborate markings to just depict some mining sites? So where there's smoke, there's fire.
If the legendary Spanish treasure exists, finding it could still be possible. The spider rock Arnold found near Rotan has survived to the present day, along with accurate rubbings of the other two rocks. These tantalizing clues may lead one lucky treasure hunter to the jackpot.
I think there's something there. I don't know that it's gold and silver bars stacked like cordwood in a cave, but I believe there's at least one or two archaeological sites, and I believe they're Spanish, that are begging to be discovered.
But until these sites are found, the Spider Rock's mystery promises to entice new generations of treasure seekers.
Treasure legends never die. There is always something that keeps them going. Spider Rock and its associated maps, they're always just beyond your reach. And that keeps the mystery alive.
In France, a tiny village has attracted treasure hunters for the last 70 years.
Rennes-le-Chateau is one of the most mysterious places on Earth.
It's got buried treasure, it's got secret codes, it's got conspiracies.
It's all because at the end of the 19th century, the priest of Rennes-le-Chateau, Béranger Saunière, became fabulously rich. And nobody, quite knows how.
The big mystery about Sonia is where the money came from.
Some say the priest discovered buried treasure, but others claim Saunière uncovered a secret so profound it could rock the foundations of the Catholic Church.
The truth is, Saunière is the tree that hides the forest.
The mystery of where Saunière got his money is only superficial. There are other things that go a great deal deeper.
This is the true story of the treasures of Rennes-le-Chateau. In the Aude region in the south of France, in the foothills of the Pyrenees, lies the village of Rennes-le-Chateau. Here, in 1953, an elderly French woman lay on her deathbed. Marie de Nano was ill and her health failing fast. Her friend, Noël Corbout, hung on her final words.
She said, "When I know that I am dying, not a moment before, then I will tell you a secret which will make you rich and famous."
It was a secret that could be worth millions.
Noël Corbout sits anxiously beside the bed, hoping that she will recover sufficiently to tell him what she'd promised.
It was the secret of the buried treasure her lover, Béranger Saunière, was supposed to have discovered 70 years earlier. It all began when Béranger Saunière was appointed the new priest of Rennes-le-Chateau.
When Béranger Saunière arrived in Rennes-le-Chateau in 1885, the place he had come to was a small, rather impoverished hilltop village.
It was not a promising place for an ambitious young priest to further his career in the church.
It had a population then of about 300. It was in a very dilapidated state, no water supply, just a rough track up to the village.
The church was pretty well dilapidated. The roof was leaking, the birds were flying in and out of the building through various holes in broken windows and in other places, and it was almost unusable.
Saunière's new church was originally a private chapel to the lords of Rennes-le-Chateau, who lived in the castle nearby, which gives the village its name. The church, like many others in the region, was dedicated to Mary Magdalene, which intrigued its new priest.
Saunière had a thing about Mary Magdalene. But of course, the reason that the church is dedicated to Mary Magdalene is because there is such a sort of cult of her and to her in that part of France.
Mary Magdalene's role in Christ's life has been the subject of debate within the church for millennia. The Bible says she was the only person who witnessed both Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. But then Mary Magdalene suddenly disappeared from the New Testament. Some legends say she fled to France, carrying the Holy Grail, the cup Christ was said to have drunk from at the Last Supper.
In this region, we have a centuries-old great tradition that Mary arrived here. The idea is that Mary Magdalene, like so many persecuted in Palestine, flees and finds refuge in Narbonne.
Myths about her life in the south of France flourished here in the Middle Ages. In the 12th century, a heretic sect known as the Cathars were said to have worshipped her and protected and hid a fabulous treasure that could even have included the Holy Grail itself.
Many mysteries derive from this period. The Cathars, the Templars, the Grail. That is why it is very important for all myths.
The Catholic Church brutally suppressed the Cathars. But their hidden treasure was never found. The myths of Mary Magdalene and Cathar treasure were well known to the new priest of Rennes-le-Chateau, Béranger Saunière. In 1885, Saunière's income was low. He had no money to renovate his crumbling church. Like a lot of priests at the time, he longed for more. And yet somehow, he had to get his church into a workable condition. Despite Saunière's meager income, he found enough to employ a housekeeper, Marie de Nano.
The relationship between Saunière and Marie de Nano was something rather more than that of a priest and his housekeeper.
She becomes Saunière's housekeeper and closest confidant for the rest of his life.
In 1886, Saunière said he received a donation from a sympathetic countess to renovate his crumbling church. During the works, something happened that would transform Saunière's life as a humble village priest.
During the renovations, the bell ringer, who used to ring the bells every day, comes down to where the work is taking place and sees a wooden pillar that had been supporting the pulpit lying on the floor. It was opened, and he sees inside a little bottle, a small phial. He picks it up and sees a bit of paper inside.
The bell ringer's great-grandson, Antoine Captier, still has the pillar that was said to have contained the phial.
He told us that he found a document in a wooden balustrade. In this balustrade there was a small piece of parchment. However, we don't know what happened to the document because my great-grandfather gave it to Saunière, and he just told him that it was just a bit of a relic.
Saunière took the parchment away for closer inspection. It appeared to be some sort of map indicating treasure below the church and the graveyard. Saunière ordered the floor of the old church to be lifted. His workers then made a startling discovery.
C'est que peu de temps après, Saunière a trouvé
Shortly afterwards, Saunière found a pot full of gold coins and shiny objects, which was witnessed by the workers, and therefore fact.
rapporté.
Là là! Mais Felici! Felici! C'est magnifique!
Saunière quickly took the pot of coins away, dismissing the find.
Il a voulu faire croire aux
He
maçons
wanted to make the workers believe they were
qu'ils avaient
worthless.
de l'ordre.
The workers were naive, but not to that extent.
Pas à ce point quand même.
After this first discovery, Saunière became convinced there was more treasure hidden somewhere in the graveyard, in a crypt known as the Lord's Tomb.
We know from the records that this crypt exists, but we don't know where it is. I think this little parchment contains the location of where one can find the crypt of the Lord's tomb.
Many believe something else on the parchment has made Saunière think the Lord's tomb could contain the missing Cathar treasure. Possibly even the Holy Grail itself. The priest enlisted his housekeeper and now lover, Marie d'Ernanot, to help him find the tomb.
He searches at night, not in the church, but in the cemetery. And he starts to excavate the cemetery to reach the crypt from the outside. The work is quite complicated because he had to do it at night, and most of all hidden from the villagers.
But word soon spread of the nocturnal activities of the village priest.
The villagers are complaining that he's basically desecrating the graveyard. He's digging up graves, he's moving headstones, he's taking the old bones and putting them into an ossuary.
Là-dessus, les gens ont bien raconté que
People talked about how he locked himself in the cemetery and they didn't see him until hours later. So he was looking for something underground.
cherchait quelque chose de souterrain.
Saunière's diary then recorded the night he discovered the Lord's tomb.
He writes everything down in his ledgers, the ledgers that I have studied. At a certain point in September 1891, he writes, "Discovery of a tomb. Evening, rain." It was that day that he goes under the church and finds the tomb of the Lords of Rennes.
Some say Saunière discovered a nobleman buried with jewelry and gold. But exactly what he found in the Lord's tomb, he never disclosed.
Donc, qu'est-ce qu'il a trouvé?
So what did he find? We don't know. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a secret. However, we are convinced that he found an entrance to a tomb, which led to a subterranean space, which then led him to somewhere else.
Le mener quelque part.
Soon afterwards, Saunière began to disappear for long periods of time, and on his return, continue to excavate the graveyard.
It's after the discovery of this tomb that Saunière starts behaving strangely. He's definitely up to something.
I think he was looking for money. He must have been lured by a small discovery of some buried jewelry belonging to the lords of Rennes.
But something else, very strange, was going on with Béranger Saunière. Marie would collect from the local post office up to 150 letters a day from all over the world and give them to Saunière. It was another secret they shared together. Whatever Saunière was up to, all of a sudden, he became fabulously rich.
As soon as he starts finding things underground in the cemetery, he starts paying for everything up front. We found he had about 100,000 francs in the bank. He's someone who suddenly gets into a lot of money.
When he first comes into money, he starts to spend it on the church. The weird decoration is put in, you know, the statue of the devil bearing the holy water stoup. There were about 90 anomalies in the decoration, things that are surprising or you wouldn't expect. Somebody wearing a kilt, for example, what's that doing in a biblical scene?
Some believe these strange decorations are clues as to what Saunière had found. What was the significance of two baby Jesuses in the church? One in the arms of Joseph, one in the arms of his mother Mary. What was Saunière trying to say?
One particular example is the big mural of Christ preaching on the hill, and at the foot of the hill there lies a money bag. The money bag has a hole in it, and a gold coin is peeping through the hole, as if symbolically Saunière is saying in this picture, I have found treasure, I've used some, not much, and there's a great deal more to be used.
Some people regard this as kind of, in a way, a treasure map, directions to different places in the vicinity of Rennes-le-Chateau where eventually you're going to find the treasure.
Once his church was fully restored, Saunière unashamedly began to spend the money on himself.
He starts to buy up land in the village to construct his domain, his estate, his gardens. He has this villa built.
He was a man of great appetites in numerous directions, and his building displayed the luxury that he longed for.
Saunière pays for the construction of an extravagant new tower, the Tour Magdala, named after Mary Magdalene. Saunière even had llamas and a monkey put into his sumptuous new gardens. His new house, the Villa Béthanie, was used for showing off his new wealth, entertaining distinguished guests with expensive wines and food.
The invoices survive for the food and the drink that he bought to throw these parties, and it's vast amounts.
I found his bills. He ordered langoustine, a lobster, 50 liters of rum straight from Martinique. So he's really living the high life in Rennes-le-Chateau.
He almost does start to become like the king of Rennes-le-Chateau. He starts to produce postcards, not just of the village, but making sure that he's in the pictures. Almost as if he's suddenly thinks of himself as a celebrity.
Whatever money he had, he spent. And he lived like a medieval aristocrat would live.
In total, Saunière spent around 200,000 francs, the equivalent of several million pounds today. Saunière's spending was so extraordinary, the villagers of Rennes-le-Chateau started to ask themselves, where did all this money come from? Soon others started asking the same question. In 1902, the new Bishop of Carcassonne, Monseigneur Beauséjour, was appointed, overseeing Saunière's parish. Asked to explain his extraordinary spending to him, Saunière refused.
The new bishop was appointed who started putting his long pointed nose into what Saunière was doing and asking him to explain the source of his wealth, which Saunière stolidly refused to do.
Non, juste pour le mot. Juste pour le mot. Voici le livre. Non, je ne connais pas ce secteur.
Saunière was removed from his post and banned from giving services. In defiance, he set up his own altar in the Villa Béthanie and continued to attract worshippers. He refused to leave his estate.
He says, my possessions are here in Rennes, so I'm staying here. So actually, he chooses his possessions over spirituality.
Eventually, Saunière was put on an ecclesiastical trial in the Vatican, which he never attended. Instead, he sent expensive lawyers to fight his case. The trial lasted 6 years, and before it could reach a judgment in 1917, after years of high living, Saunière died of heart failure, caused by liver cirrhosis. Yet, for all his extraordinary spending, Saunière died penniless and without property in his name. It was said that to stop the church seizing his wealth, Saunière transferred his entire estate to his housekeeper and confidant, Marie Denarnaud.
The villagers say that she actually visited Saunière's grave every day and every night, so she obviously remained devoted to him.
In later life, Marie Denarnaud became a recluse, but was once seen wearing some of the jewelry Saunière was alleged to have found.
She's doing it so that the sunlight would shine on the antique jewelry with which she had encrusted both her hands. The neighbour said, "Oh, Marie, they're beautiful." She ran indoors, came back without them, and was never seen wearing them again.
The stories of Saunière's incredible discovery spread. Had he found the legendary treasure of the Cathars, or something even more extraordinary? What was the secret of the mysterious priest of Rennes-le-Chateau? The first answers to this mystery started to appear in 1946, almost 30 years after Saunière's death, when Noël Corbu and his family arrived in the village.
Noël Corbu is an interesting character because he's mainly a businessman with quite a few business ventures, but he's also had tried his hand at writing novels.
One day, there are people, the Corbu family, who live nearby in Bugarache, going for a walk in Rennes-le-Chateau. They go to the bell tower and see that someone lives in the estate.
The Corbus discovered the estate was owned by Marie Denano. Noël Corbu's daughter, Claire, remembers the encounter.
The first time we met Marie, when we were children, we thought she was like a real grandmother, dressed in black, very small. She loved to laugh, always smiling.
Having lived as a recluse for years, Marie was delighted with her new visitors.
My father really liked the place. He loved hilltop locations, castles, all these impressive things. My father really liked Miss de Narnaud's property.
After several visits, Noël Corbu was so enamored by Marie's estate in Rennes-le-Chateau, he offered her a deal.
He said, if we adopt you as a family member, as a sort of adopted grandmother, we will treat you to the very best of our ability. We will be your friends, we will be your family, we will take care of you in return for us having what had been Saunière's old estate.
Marie allowed the Corbus to run the estate, and little by little took Noël Corbu into her confidence, sharing with him the secret of her lover, Béranger Saunière, and their discovery of buried treasure. But she didn't reveal where the treasure was hidden. She told Corbu she would only do that at the moment she is about to die.
And then she gets a stroke. She can neither write nor speak. Noël Corbu sits anxiously beside the bed, hoping that she will recover sufficiently to tell him what she'd promised.
Marie died in 1953. Childless, she left her entire estate to the Corbus. And then the stories of what Marie had told Noël Corbu about Saunière began to emerge. In a series of sensational newspaper articles, Corbu revealed that Denano and Saunière had discovered a great hoard of treasure. But the treasure wasn't anything to do with Mary Magdalene, the Cathars, or the Holy Grail. It was something quite different, a treasure that was a king's ransom, a treasure that had been hidden and seemingly forgotten by history. Corbu said that in the 13th century, Blanche Castile, Queen Regent of France, had hidden her nation's entire treasury, some 18 million gold pieces and jewelry somewhere under the church of Rennes-le-Chateau. It was to pay the ransom of her son, the future Louis IX, who had been captured by the Egyptians during the Crusades.
He loved this story, my father. He loved telling it to his clients, and he made a recording, so he didn't have to repeat it all the time.
According to Noël Corbeau, Marie had said that she and Saunière had found just a fraction of the Blanche Castile treasure, and much more was still to be discovered.
Et elle lui dit, mon bon Noël.
She says to him, "My dear Noël, with what Saunière has left, we can feed Rennes for 100 years." She also tells him, "You merely have to bend over to pick up gold."
Marie told Corbeau that Saunière's frequent disappearances were when he would go abroad to sell bits of treasure and then send the money back by post. But Marie had died before she could reveal the really vital information, where the hoard was buried, taking the secret of the Blanche Castile treasure to her grave. But Corbeau was certain it was down there somewhere.
She had convinced him that there was something of immense value waiting to be discovered. And he looked for it everywhere.
Soon, the entire Corbeau family were treasure hunting.
As a child and a young girl, it was my principal activity, looking for the treasure. And with my brother, it was our most important hobby.
Given all the publicity surrounding Rennes-le-Chateau's buried treasure, Corbeau opened a hotel and restaurant in Saunière's old estate to cater for the new flood of treasure hunters.
His clans were treasure hunters, drawn to the history of Rennes as told by my father.
Among them was one of the most famous treasure hunters in France. In 1958, Robert Charroux arrived in Rennes-le-Chateau.
Robert Charroux was the president of the Treasure Hunters Club in France. He had written several books. He was very well known for treasure hunting. And in Rennes, it caused a lot of publicity.
Charroux used metal detectors to search for the treasure's hiding place in the church and the cemetery. But despite all his experience, Charroux couldn't find the treasure, which quietly pleased Noël Corbeau.
I think Charroux said he was convinced that my father-in-law knew a lot more than he let on. Maybe that is why he never succeeded.
Corbeau and Charroux' stories spread like wildfire throughout France. So much so that in 1961, French channel ORTF made a program about the mystery. Such was his deep involvement in the creation of the myth, Corbeau himself played the part of Saunière. Like many, treasure hunter Jean Brunelin was drawn to the stories of Béranger Saunière.
It is treasure that has brought me to Rennes-le-Chateau. We heard stories here and there. Someone made a hole here, others made a hole there, Someone used a drill to blow air from one side to see if it came out the other.
But after years of treasure hunting and several official archaeological digs, no treasure was ever found.
This treasure hunting in and around Rennes became so intense and became, the whole place was honeycombed with these tunnels. And in 1965, further excavations were banned.
But the story was about to take a new, dramatic twist and lead to even more extraordinary theories about Saunier's wealth. It was all to do with the parchment that was supposed to have been found in the pillar that first set Saunier off treasure hunting. Everyone believed it had been lost forever. But in 1967, a book by journalist Gérard Desède sensationally claimed Saunier had found not one, but 2 parchments, and published them for the first time.
The step between it becoming kind of a regional sensation to a national one to an international one, the big step there is a book called The Gold of Rennes.
According to Desède, Saunier had taken the parchments to his bishop, who had advised him to take them to the highest church authorities in Paris. Desède claimed when Saunier returned from Paris, he was suddenly rich beyond his wildest dreams. So had he found a great treasure after all? Desède's co-author, Pierre Plantard, appeared in a BBC interview to give some clues to their theory.
Will the treasure of Rennes-le-Chateau ever be found?
Ici, vous me parlez d'un trésor matériel. Ne parlons pas de trésor matériel. Disons simplement qu'il existe un secret à Rennes-le-Chateau.
But if Plantard and Desède were right, and Saunier hadn't found a material treasure, what had he found that had made him so rich?
What they do, they take the Saunier story, the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery as it originally was, and use it as the hook for a whole other story.
Desède and Plantard claimed the parchments held a secret to prove that the lineage of the last Merovingian king of France, Dagobert II, hadn't died out but still existed today, and that a shadowy organization called the Priory of Sion was founded to protect it. A few years later, it was then a British author, Henry Lincoln, who said he had separately decoded Desède's parchments and took the story even further. He claimed that the parchments were a series of clues that sensationally proved Mary Magdalene had indeed fled the Holy Land for France, but did so when pregnant with Jesus' child. And that Christ's bloodline became the French Merovingian kings, of whom the mysterious Pierre Plantard was the only living survivor. The Holy Grail was known as the Saint Grail, but it wasn't a cup at all, but the Saint Real, meaning royal blood, and this was Saunier's great secret. Lincoln appeared on American television to reveal his discovery.
The mystery which triggered the discovery which we eventually made, which triggered the whole course of research, was concerned with a small village in France where a priest had apparently found a treasure. We looked into the history of that area, and the Grail kept surfacing. And the Grail in turn leads us into the bloodline.
The bloodline was the Holy Grail, and Saunier had discovered it on the parchments. It was an earth-shattering claim that could shake the Catholic Church to its foundations.
It was a huge bombshell for all kinds of reasons. Not only Jesus fathered children, with all the implications that has for our understanding of Christ and Christianity, but also that descendants of that bloodline are still around today.
The revelations seemed to turn the story of the Bible on its head. The bloodline secret was the source of Saunier's wealth. It wasn't the Blanche of Castile treasure, but a huge bribe from the Vatican to keep him quiet. However, just a year later, it was announced that the parchments were in fact forgeries. It was all a huge hoax by Plantin and de Sède. Henry Lincoln wasn't part of the hoax, but a victim of it.
This book is like a punch in the face. It's not possible. In this book, he talks of Merovingians, Order of Sion, spies. It's not possible. So we investigated all these clues from de Sède, but in fact, de Sède was tricking us. We were hooked, and he was just reeling us in.
What their motivation was, nobody knows. A lot of people have regarded it as a bizarre bit of performance art.
But the story didn't end there. 20 years later, the hoax became the basis for one of the best-selling books of all time. Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code took de Sède and Plantin's invention of the Priory of Sion and Jesus' bloodline to a whole new level.
The story of Rennes-le-Chateau still generates an extraordinary frenzy amongst treasure hunters and writers. For commercial reasons, this mystery is much more interesting to claim that Saunier kept a terrible secret.
But if the source of Saunier's wealth wasn't a huge bribe from the Vatican, what was it? It certainly wasn't by finding the Blanche Castile treasure, as told by Noël Corbu. There is no record of this treasure in any history book. While it is true that Louis IX had been captured, the ransom was paid and he was released. So where had all Saunier's money come from? The answer, it seems, may lie in the 150 letters Saunier was getting daily. What was shown during the trial was that the letters weren't the proceeds of selling treasure, as Marie had said, but something far more grubby. By mail order, Saunier had been dishonestly selling prayers to people around the world, known as trafficking in masses. According to church rules, a priest was allowed to say 3 masses a day. Saunier was getting requests to say hundreds. And by doing this, Saunier had accumulated a fortune.
Alors, comme il a trafiqué les messes.
So, how did he traffic in masses? He was very good. He invented something we are still doing today. He put ads in magazines. Poor priest in a poor village needs masses to restore the church. He received a lot of money.
Il a reçu beaucoup d'argent.
This, then, was Saunier's secret. He was a highly enterprising crook.
It's in Saunier's temperament. He wants to make money from everything. From the moment he finds a new source of income, he is going to use it. He had actually made the biggest part of his fortune by trafficking in masses. But he was also an agent for booze, an agent for oil, he produced postcards, he made money out of everything, and he made a lot of money.
But if Saunier was just a crook, why had Marie always claimed that he had found treasure?
The villagers see him build this nice villa, buy land and give money to everyone. They think it's weird. And afterwards, smart Marie, to give people a reason, says that he has found a treasure. This explains everything.
But the other reason is that after Saunier died, she was almost destitute. Marie needed someone to support her. She had spun a yarn to the Corbeaus.
She is smart, Marie. Marie is always scared. She has nothing. What can I do if these people throw me out on the street? To keep them interested, she says, at the end of my life, Monsieur Corbeau, I will tell you something that will make you powerful.
So was Corbeau just naive, a victim of Marie's story? Or perhaps he had reasons to believe.
Corbeau was a very successful businessman, and when he arrived in Rennes, what he needed was to make the place a universal attraction. And so whatever the attraction is, whatever the mystery is, the more you can make of it, the more tourists you will attract.
When Corbeau first came to Rennes, there were only on average 200 tourists a year. Nearly 70 years later, thanks to Marie and Corbeau's stories, and more recently, the Da Vinci Code, tens of thousands visit to learn the strange tale of the treasures of Rennes-le-Chateau. And even though so much has been revealed to be a hoax, many continue to search for the tomb containing treasure, or a secret.
You have the feeling that when you come to Rennes-le-Chateau, you can solve an enigma. I think that explains its global success. It is a game in which you can play a role. In the end, we all need dreams. Who needs the truth when we can have a mystery?
Yamashita's gold is one of the greatest treasure hoards ever known.
In today's currency, it represents over $100 billion in value.
According to the myth, this incredible fortune was the proceeds of ruthless Japanese looting throughout Asia during World War II. For one amateur treasure hunter, finding the gold became a lifelong obsession.
If he had to get down on his hands and knees and dig with his fingers until they bled, I see him being that kind of man.
But little did he know, he had a mighty rival, one of the most brutal dictators of the 20th century.
Marcos was unquestionably a thug. He was a gangster.
Just when this penniless Filipino had riches beyond his wildest dreams within his grasp, his quest turned into a nightmare.
He's put a target on his back.
This is the extraordinary story of Roger Rojas.
He was willing to be David against Goliath.
Roger was a hero.
And the legend of Yamashita's gold. In May 1970, amateur treasure hunter Roger Rojas was combing the jungles around his hometown of Baguio in the northern Philippines. For over a decade, he'd spent every spare moment searching for a long-lost hoard of treasure. He'd put all his money into his quest. Unless he found it, he faced ruin. Then, after weeks of back-breaking work, at last, Roger spotted something. Had he finally found what he'd been looking for his entire life? Had he found Yamashita's gold? The legend of Yamashita's gold is one of the greatest stories of war loot in history. By 1942, the Japanese Imperial Army had successfully invaded all of Southeast Asia. As they advanced, they mercilessly ransacked country after country. They stole on a massive scale, reportedly unrivaled in military history.
Yamashita's gold is wealth beyond belief. People wouldn't believe how much it is. $1 trillion worth. So it's a mind-blowing amount.
The mastermind heading this covert operation, codenamed the Golden Lily, was said to be Prince Chichibu, the emperor's brother.
This guy is brilliant. Prince Chichibu was a perfect choice to head up the Golden Lily because he wasn't just a military man, he was an Oxford scholar, and he brought an incredible amount of creativity and lateral thinking to how we'll go about this complex process of looting.
The Golden Lily operatives just completely took everything from all the countries. They left them with nothing. They invaded, they took all their wealth and just left them penniless.
It wasn't just banks and financial institutions, but it also had museums, temples, art galleries, rare books, anything that was worth money. They knew about it, knew where it was, how much it was worth, and they took it. The Golden Lily's looting was so comprehensive, they even targeted the underworld, the gangster world, the black markets, and they absolutely drained them of anything that was of value.
Having amassed treasures of all shapes and sizes, the Golden Lily's mission was far from over. They needed to get it back home, to Japan. First, they melted the gold into easy-to-move ingots. But this smelting also served a shadier purpose.
When gold is made, it's stamped, and you can tell where it came from. But when it's been resmelted, you don't know where it came from. So they wanted to stamp the little sign on the gold bars that the gold was actually made in Japan. Then it would look like the gold was Japanese gold, of Japanese origin.
This stolen gold was then brought to the Philippines. There it was inventoried and then sent on to Japan by ship.
The Philippines was chosen as the Golden Lily's transportation hub because it was pretty much in the center of the vast Japanese empire.
For the first year of operations, the Golden Lily's transportation network ran like clockwork. But then, the tide of the war turned. In June 1942, Japanese and US forces met near the tiny Pacific island of Midway. Over just 4 days, the US forces sank 5 Japanese ships. They destroyed 270 aircraft and killed 3,500 men. The Japanese had lost control of the seas. Now it was too risky for them to ship the gold home. They needed a new plan. They turned to their finest fighting general, Tomoyuki Yamashita.
He has an incredible track record. Nobody has the reputation he does, and if anyone can pull one out of the hat, it would be him.
Yamashita made his name when he caused the greatest humiliation of the British Army in its history. In December 1941, he invaded Malaya, sweeping down the peninsula in only a matter of weeks. Yamashita then captured the British military stronghold of Singapore.
Hitherto, both Malaya and Singapore had been thought to be completely unassailable, that the British were totally in charge militarily, and he proved them wrong. He made the British capitulate, and it was the biggest capitulation of the British Army in British military history.
Virtually overnight, Yamashita took nearly 100,000 Allied soldiers prisoner. His victory sent shockwaves across the world and earned Yamashita his fearsome nickname, the Tiger of Malaya. With the gold now stuck in the Philippines, Yamashita was being asked to come up with another miracle. The story goes, he was told to hide the gold until it was safe to move it. He identified 175 suitable burial sites across the Philippines. They would hold the gold until the Japanese were once again victorious. And the Philippines proved the ideal place to hide this treasure.
They put it in very isolated parts throughout the Philippines, mostly covered by very mountainous terrain and a thick, thick jungle. Once you got these tunnels built, it would become virtually impossible to see that there had been anything ever buried there because of the growth rate in the jungle.
It said Yamashita ordered detailed maps to be made of the exact location of each treasure vault. And each map was carefully encoded.
These maps were done in an old Japanese dialect called kanji, a language which is between 1,500 and 2,000 years old, and there were no topographical references on them. They used the old characters to represent certain landmarks.
Unless you knew the complex code, these maps were meaningless. And there were even further layers of security.
Bombs, grenades, decoy walls that would lead you into another trap.
The Golden Lily left nothing to chance. And they had a vast system of booby traps that consisted of poisonous gas, explosives, complex use of the water table. So if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to drown in your pursuit of reaching the treasures.
But the maps that were drawn highlighted where all those traps were. If you didn't have a map and you went into one of these treasure vaults, it's very likely that you wouldn't come out alive.
And to ensure all the treasure vault locations remain top secret, the number of people in the know was ruthlessly kept to a minimum.
They use prisoner of war or local slave labor to build the actual treasure vaults. And the people who are building it don't know why, but that's irrelevant. They're gonna die anyway. So they're usually killed, shot on the spot.
But for all Yamashita's efforts, the gold still wasn't safe. In October 1944, the Americans landed in the Philippines. The fighting that followed was the bloodiest of the Pacific War.
The fighting in the Philippines at the end of the war was extremely brutal.
Yamashita would fight to the very last man for the emperor.
But even a master tactician like Yamashita couldn't stop the Americans' advance.
The Philippines has 7,000 plus islands and is very, very difficult to defend against an invading force. Yamashita, as a great general, would have known that.
Yamashita faced a crisis. He knew he couldn't hold the Philippines. All he could do was drag out the fight for as long as possible. And it seemed there was one particular reason Yamashita needed to buy himself time. He still hadn't finished burying the gold.
Gold and Lily are running out of time and desperate. So they've got these ships in the harbor with gold that they need to get into the tunnels. They have no time. What do? They scuttle them and sink them.
April 1945. Yamashita had been forced to retreat back to the mountains around the northern city of Baguio.
Their systematic hiding of their national treasure becomes less systematic and more panicked. They need to do it immediately because they're about to suffer defeat. 174 treasure vaults done and dusted. Only one is left.
With time running out, Yamashita ordered the chief engineers to seal the final treasure vault.
These engineers knew everything. They knew how the maps were made. They knew where the burial sites were. They knew how they were booby-trapped.
What they didn't know was Yamashita had one last move to protect the gold. The story goes that while the engineers were carrying out his orders, Yamashita sealed the vault himself. The engineers were still inside. Now, they would be its guardians for eternity. Three months later, World War II was over. General Yamashita was put on trial for war crimes.
Did you at any any time issue any orders directing the killing of non-combatant citizens. Absolutely not. Anything.
The trial lasted just over 5 weeks.
The commission finds you guilty as charged and sentences you to death by hanging.
Yamashita took the secrets of the gold to his grave. There was only one other person who allegedly knew of the gold's whereabouts: Prince Chichibu. And in 1953, he died of TB.
Anybody who knew anything about this treasure is now dead.
It seemed Yamashita's gold was lost forever. But in the Philippines, after the horrors of war, the legend of Yamashita's gold lived on.
There were lots and lots of rumors that the Japanese had buried treasure all over the Philippines.
It's almost a national obsession. Everybody across the country is aware of it, and everyone's looking for it.
Among those who'd grown up with stories about the gold was a young Filipino locksmith. Rogelio Rojas, better known as Roger, was born in 1943, just as Yamashita's gold was being buried.
Roger's childhood was really difficult. The Philippines are extremely impoverished. His family is impoverished.
Roger was one of millions of Filipinos growing up in the shadow of World War II.
The war had devastated the Philippines. Manila was absolutely on its knees in a way that no other city in the whole of the Second World War, other than Warsaw. It was dreadful. Hundreds of thousands killed, families broken up, desperate poverty, no real economy going. It was in a really bad state.
So it was no surprise that the legend of Yamashita's gold just took Roger by heart at a very young age. Someone that poor with a possibility of obtaining wealth beyond your wildest dreams, of course you're going to go for it.
Roger the locksmith lived in Baguio, the northern city, near to where Yamashita made his last stand.
Roger surmises that they must have hid some of the treasure around his town. So he looks around his town right from the start, because he knows logically that's probably one of the best places to start.
Roger was a very diligent man. Every spare moment he was out there working, seeing what he could find, eliminating areas, and continuing to move forward in a very logical, progressive manner.
To help him in his quest, Roger scrimped and saved and bought himself a metal detector. Yet all Roger had ever managed to find were a few old coins and some Japanese ammunition. But that didn't shake his faith. One day he was sure he would come across the treasure he'd been dreaming of since he was a boy.
No matter how many disappointments a treasure hunter has, they will always keep going.
Then, in 1961, after years of hunting the gold with just youthful optimism, Roger had what seemed to be a breakthrough. He got the kind of clue he'd been longing for, a map of a tunnel complex. There were lots of maps and sketches like this in treasure hunting circles at the time. Roger had seen plenty of them before, but all had been fakes. This one was different. This map had come from a Japanese soldier.
He's convinced that this is the real deal.
Trouble was, the map was in the Golden Lily's fiendishly complex code.
It's a needle in a haystack, and you don't even know where the haystack is because the map has no topographical features.
But Roger also knew that this Japanese soldier had been in Baguio with a group of engineers as they buried gold during the final days of Yamashita's retreat. The map allegedly related to one of those treasure vaults.
It was getting closer. He could feel it.
Roger never gives up. And the reason is he knows the treasure is there. And he knows that year after year, if nothing else, he's eliminating where it isn't.
Yet for all his high hopes, Roger just couldn't crack the map's code. And so, even after looking for several more years, he was still no closer to finding Yamashita's gold. But at least the map confirmed to Roger his first instincts were right. There had to be treasure somewhere around Baguio.
He knows it's there. This is not a myth. This is historical fact.
Then Roger met a man who seemed to offer him his next breakthrough, Eusebio Okubo. Okubo told Roger he had served under the Japanese as an interpreter during their occupation of the Philippines.
There were a lot of Filipinos who claimed to know where Japanese buried treasure was, mainly because an awful lot of Filipinos had, perforce, worked with the Japanese, not necessarily what we would call collaborators, but simply because the Japanese needed cooks, drivers, interpreters, all that sort of thing.
When Roger met Okubo, he would have had mixed feelings. Here's somebody who colluded with the enemy.
Okubo confessed he had served none other than General Yamashita. While working for him, Okubo had witnessed Yamashita taking a large quantity of gold to Baguio towards the very end of the war. And then, Okubo revealed the crucial piece of information Roger was after. This gold was in wooden boxes, stashed in a tunnel not far from Baguio General Hospital.
So this was the final link. This allowed him to tie the bow together and have the perfect package. Now he knows where to go, he knows where to dig. He was elated because it now pinpointed the area for him to look at.
But little did Roger know, he had a rival. The most powerful man in the Philippines, President Ferdinand Marcos. In 1965, Marcos had been democratically elected. But he rapidly became a pathologically greedy dictator.
Money was extremely important to Ferdinand Marcos. He loved it like nothing else.
And there was only one person who could match Marcos's greed. His shopaholic wife, Imelda.
Marcos wooed Imelda, it is said, by taking her down to the vault beneath his bank and just showing her enormous great stacks of $100 bills. Whether or not this is true or not, I don't know, but it's extremely likely. And I should think he almost certainly would have convinced her that she was onto a good thing.
But Imelda's lavish lifestyle wasn't the only reason Marcos needed money.
The richer you were, the more powerful you were. It's that simple. It's a very simple equation.
And nothing could make Marcos more powerful than finding Yamashita's gold.
It's not at all surprising that Marcos was interested in Yamashita's gold because he was a thug, basically, and the mere thought of the promise of gold, and he would have been onto it like a shot.
Compared to Roger, Marcos had a serious advantage in the hunt for Yamashita's gold. Power.
It was incredibly easy for Marcos to use his power to find the gold. He has entire armies at his disposal. Armies, ships, experts on maps and deciphering all sorts of clues.
Despite all these resources, Marcos hadn't found anything, and so he devised a shrewd strategy.
He was a brilliant politician, but he was also brilliantly corrupt. On the surface, he seemed to be a rational person, going by the law, by the books, but in person, he was quite ruthless.
Marcos passed a law demanding treasure hunters apply for a permit, detailing where they were going to start digging.
He comes up with the permit system because this way he has all the enthusiastic treasure hunters all across the country working for him, because they've now told him where they think the treasure is.
He's just waiting to see if anyone finds it, then he can move in, because he has the resources to do that. And you know, that's very smart.
Meanwhile, back in Baguio, in 1970, Roger married. With a new wife and child on the way, he needed Yamashita's gold now more than ever. And so Roger dutifully applied for one of Marcos's permits.
Roger did everything the right way. He thought that if he followed the rules that had been put in place by the government, he would be able to search, he would be able to find and excavate and recover, and it would all be done with the blessings of the government.
In Roger's town, the person who manages that application is none other than Marcos's uncle.
In May 1970, armed with his permit, his map, and Akubo's information, Roger decided to risk everything to find Yamashita's gold. He spent all his life savings hiring a team of laborers. Together they started hacking their way through the thick jungle vegetation near Baguio General Hospital.
So it was really difficult for Roger to find the tunnel near the hospital because it was 25 years before that it was blasted shut. And every single year in the rainy season, these jungles, you know, they change their look and feel dramatically.
Then, after 2 weeks of almost non-stop searching, Roger spotted the mouth of a cave. Could this be the entrance to the treasure vault Akubo told him about? A 100 meters into the tunnel, a collapse meant Roger couldn't go any further. But for Roger, this was a good sign. He knew the Japanese had used dynamite to blast their treasure vaults shut. And so Roger and his crew began the arduous task of clearing the way.
The conditions for Roger and the team digging in the tunnel would have been horrific. It was hot, there were insects, there were snakes. It was very, very hard work.
Digging the tunnel was very, very dangerous. And Roger knew that if this really was a tunnel that the Japanese had built, there may be booby traps.
But Roger was willing to risk his life to get to Yamashita's gold.
Once you get that gold fever, it is insatiable. You just cannot quench that appetite. He was becoming obsessed. One more spade, one more rock. I'm going to get it. This is going to be the treasure of a lifetime. And everybody's going to say, yes, you found it.
Finally, after 4 long months of digging, they broke through. It was then he made a grim discovery. Skeletons dressed in rags. But these weren't just any rags. They were Japanese military uniforms. Surely these were the remains of the engineers who had hidden Yamashita's gold, only to be buried alive by Yamashita himself.
He thinks he's there, and he knows now that he has all the pieces to the puzzle. He is literally at the threshold of the gold recovery that he has sought now for 10 years. It's there, it's within his fingertips' grasp.
Stretching beyond the skeletons was a vast network of tunnels. Roger and his team spent weeks exploring them. Day after day, they found nothing.
The next day, he was out there ready to go again. He knew it was there. He believed in his heart of hearts that that gold was there. He was going to go after it no matter what.
But a full 6 months on from finding the entrance to the tunnel, Roger still hadn't found any treasure.
Roger had spent all the money that he had raised to start the dig to begin with, and no one was going to give him any more money.
No money meant no crew. It seemed the hunt was over. Roger had squandered his life savings on a huge mistake. Just before Roger decided to give up once and for all, he had one last go with his metal detector. Then he heard its telltale buzz.
This buzz that Roger got from his metal detector must have been the best sound he'd ever heard in his life.
Roger was stunned. Hiding behind the wall was a gold statue of Buddha.
This was that moment in life that you would look back on and you say, yes, I have achieved my goal for my entire life. This is it. This find is the most significant find of anything that anybody had discovered in the Philippines.
The Buddha was in the Burmese style. According to the legend, the Japanese had looted religious artifacts from temples right across Burma. He really must have found one of Yamashita's 175 treasure vaults. And that wasn't all. The area around the Buddha was stacked full of wooden boxes. Finally, it was payday.
The gold that Roger has just discovered is worth a fortune. Each of those bars is worth $1,000, and he estimated there were over 1,000 boxes of the gold bars. So you're talking an incredible amount of money, more treasure than even he ever dreamed he would find. I mean, this has surpassed his wildest expectations.
Roger returned home with the Buddha, planning to go back for the gold with trucks and men. But the more he looked at the statue, the more curious Roger became. There was something about it that wasn't quite right. The Buddha was full of diamonds.
The value had just gone off the chart.
Roger, I mean, he's getting richer and richer by the minute. He has 1,000 boxes of gold bars, he has a gold Buddha, and now he has handfuls of diamonds.
That night, Roger documented his life-changing find. News of Roger's miraculous discovery soon spread to the presidential palace.
I can just imagine him going crazy when the word had gotten to him. Marcos was going to do anything to get that Buddha away from Rojas, and it was going to eventually sit in Marcos' palace.
Unfortunately for Roger, Marcos's primary tactic was brute force. On the 5th of April 1971, it's said a group of mysterious men turned up at Roger's house.
Rojas didn't answer the door.
You have to ask yourself, how would you feel if all of a sudden at 2:30 in the morning, there's loud banging and knocking on the door? I think he'd be panic-stricken, and I'm sure he was.
They said, "You have 3 minutes to open the door or we're going to shoot you right here." They took everything away from him.
Can you imagine the feeling of violation? His entire life, he's looked for this, he's found it, and now it's been taken.
But if Marcos thought he could intimidate Roger and his family, he was wrong.
Roger had risked everything to find this gold, and he wasn't going to let it go so easily.
Roger reported the theft to the police.
By that time, President Marcos had a considerable stranglehold on the police and the army particularly.
But Marcos did not yet control the media. Within days, the press picked up Roger's story.
It was a huge scandal. You know, there's stolen loot, it's World War II, it's the Japanese, it's Marcos being implicated.
The newspaper was full of articles that were nothing short of calling Marcos a common thief.
The hostile press coverage came at a critical time for Marcos.
He was widely known to have fixed his second term of office, the elections, which were ludicrously corrupt. I mean, he allegedly won by 2 million votes. It was just impossible. He was widely lampooned on all sides for corruption, and he was beginning to feel himself quite insecure.
Marcos needed to silence this treasure hunter fast. There was one obvious solution.
The Marcos regime was notorious for extrajudicial executions. You'd have death squads basically killing people who were seen as being very critical of the regime.
But this time, Marcos needed a different approach.
I think by that time he must have thought that the story had enough public exposure for him not to be able to risk just making Roger vanish, like a lot of his opponents.
3 weeks later, Roger at last received some good news. He was told his Buddha was waiting to be collected at the courthouse in Baguio. When he got there, he was in for a shock.
When Roger saw the Buddha, he knew immediately this wasn't the Buddha that he had found. It was a different color, different shape, facial expression. The head didn't come off.
Marcos is expecting Roger to say, yes, that's the Buddha, thank you.
But he didn't know Rojas. Rojas was determined he wasn't going to let that boot up. And this was a huge mistake for Marcos because he had misread Rojas' personality.
Roger declared the Buddha was a fake.
I think that was completely reckless of him. because by that time he would have known that he was a marked man, and to cause that kind of fuss, effectively tackling Marcos himself at a personal level, would have been absolutely ridiculous and very stupid, in my view. However, he did it. He clearly was a very stubborn man.
Now he's publicly given him two fingers. Really, this marks the beginning of the end for Roger.
Just over 2 weeks later, more mysterious men came for Roger. And it seems it wasn't long before interrogation turned to torture. Over several days, Roger said he was repeatedly burned with cigarettes. He was beaten. And electrocuted. Eventually, Roger claimed he signed an affidavit stating Marcos had nothing to do with the theft of his Buddha, and revealed the location of the thousands of gold ingots.
Roger was a very broken man when he signed that affidavit. I mean, there he was fighting publicly, but now admitting that no, there was no wrongdoing. He must have been completely demoralized.
Marcos had Roger imprisoned and wasted no time helping himself to the rest of Roger's find. But eventually Marcos's megalomania would prove his undoing. In 1986, a popular revolution forced Marcos and Imelda to flee the country. The Filipino people stormed Marcos's presidential palace, and what they found inside was unbelievable.
They were amazed at what they found. They found treasures of statues and art and thousands of pairs of shoes. This is just what they left behind.
Marcos was by far and away the wealthiest man alive.
They were so wealthy, they didn't really know what to do with their money.
One of the questions for the Filipino people was where had the Marcoses' enormous wealth come from? For most, there was an obvious answer.
Marcos's wealth primarily came from theft, embezzlement, and corruption. And you can look back, I think, on their joint reign as simply being a plot of self-enrichment. And the administration of the Philippines was merely a secondary item.
They were basically using the public treasury as their piggy bank.
Years later, while on trial for fraud and embezzlement, Imelda Marcos's defense declared their fortune was not looted from the Philippine treasury, but actually came from finding Yamashita's gold.
I think Imelda claimed that their joint wealth came primarily from finding Yamashita's gold because it was a very good blind. Nobody could prove otherwise. Yamashita's gold was just a wonderful alibi.
But for Roger Rojas, none of this mattered. His life was in ruins.
Roger never fully recovered from his torture. And the damage is so great that he can't see out of his right eye for the rest of his life after this. He's lost his money, he's lost his self-respect, he's lost his wife. Roger has lost everything.
Despite all this, Roger still had a bit of the spirit that had helped him find the gold.
It's a treasure hunter's mentality. They must get to the end of the story. They must get the treasure. Anyway, Roger had lost so much, he had nothing to lose.
With Marcos in exile in Hawaii, Roger filed a lawsuit against him. Even when Marcos died 1 year later, in September 1989, the case continued.
You could say that the Marcoses actually got away with it. He went out, lived his exile in Hawaii and died of natural causes. You could well say that they did rather well out of it.
It would take a further 7 years before Roger was at last vindicated. In 1996, the jury concluded Marcos had stolen Roger's find. $43 billion in damages were awarded.
When the court finds in Roger's favor, it's a significant moment in legal history. $43 billion is awarded to Roger, which is the biggest civil lawsuit award in history.
Sadly, Roger never saw justice done. On the eve of his day in court, he died. He was just 49 years old. Then, in 1998, the huge compensation award was overturned. While no court has challenged the verdict that Marcos stole Roger's treasure, how to determine its value is still being fought out by the lawyers.
It's hard not to look back at Roger and feel empathy for this man. His determination was boundless. And I think, if nothing else, Roger was a hero. And I think that's how he's going to be remembered.
He was willing to be David against Goliath. He was willing to put his life on the line, and therefore my hat off to him.
Roger's tragic story begs the question, was what he found a one-off? Or as the legend states, are there another 174 treasure vaults still waiting to be discovered? Since the war, treasure hunters from across the world have scoured the Philippines in search of Yamashita's gold. Yet none of them have found anything. Nonetheless, people are still willing to risk their lives looking.
Searching for Yamashita's gold is a very dangerous activity. Even to this day, I think it was in 2000, 2 men were buried alive looking for treasure.
What drives them is their certainty that Yamashita's gold is still out there.
The legend of Yamashita's gold in the Philippines is huge, and it hasn't died.
It endures because it's real, because there really are burial sites. There really is gold bars, gold dishes, gold treasures that are still to be found in the islands of the Philippines.
Deserts are brutal, bare, and barren. But one desert in Southern California is said to hold something truly astonishing.
The lost ship of the Mojave is one of the greatest legends that were ever told.
According to the myth, somewhere in the Mojave Desert is a shipwreck.
The idea that a ship got lost inland in the desert is unheard of.
And this isn't just any ship.
Oh, it's laden with gold, it's got silver bars, it's got jewels, black pearls, it's got everything under the sun.
But could it possibly be real? One man believed it was.
He was convinced that there was a ship out there. He just doesn't know where.
His search would take him across one of the harshest environments on Earth.
The desert can reach temperatures of 120 to 125 degrees, and then that's in the shade.
There are no settlements, there's no support crew, there's nowhere else for him to turn.
If you're not properly prepared and you head out to the desert, you will die.
This is the amazing story of Charlie Clusker and the mystery of his quest for the legendary lost ship of the Mojave Desert. In 1847, the man who would risk everything to find the lost ship was in search of a new life. Demobilized from the army after fighting in the Mexican War, Charlie Clusker decided to head west to America's new frontier, California.
To Charlie, California would have been this place of extraordinary possibility. California, even in the 1840s, was a place of magic. The very name signified fertility, potential, underexploited mineral wealth, a place where white Americans like him could go and potentially make their fortune.
But getting there was far from easy. It involved a perilous journey of over 2,000 miles that would take Charlie more than 3 months.
Charlie took the southern overland route to California. This was the cheapest way of getting to California. It wasn't the quickest, and it definitely wasn't the safest. This wasn't the journey for the faint-hearted. You had to endure huge heat, cold, snow, mud, as well as desert conditions. This was a difficult, arduous process.
And it wasn't just the environment that was hostile. Charlie's route crossed the heartlands of fierce Native American tribes.
Charlie may well have been worried about possible Indian attack. He may well have heard some rumors about that. In a sense, you were taking your life in your own hands.
But instead of attacking Charlie, it seems that when he met one tribe, the Kawiya, they told him a tale he would never forget. They said the desert was once covered with a great stretch of water. One day, a great bird with white wings came floating down. It stopped. Then the water went away, and the bird was left lying in the sands. Its white wings fell down, leaving a tall, bare tree sticking up. After a while, the wind blew and blew, and the bird was covered with sand. Charlie couldn't stop thinking about the story. He was sure it wasn't describing a bird.
He puts two and two together. He's thinking, the white wings of the bird sound an awful lot like the sails of a ship. And the tree sounds very much like the mast of the ship. And all of a sudden, for him, it's starting to make sense.
But how could there really be a ship in the middle of the desert? Charlie and the Kawiya tribe were miles away from the sea. And so Charlie put it to the back of his mind and carried on to California. In spring 1848, he finally arrived in Los Angeles. But it wasn't what he expected.
When Charlie arrives in California at the beginning of 1848, it's still essentially a wilderness. There's barely a population of 20,000 in a vast expanse of territory. The city that's going to become San Francisco has fewer than 1,000 residents. So really, it's a vast expanse with very few people in it. And the people who are there are mainly ranching cattle.
It's nothing like what he envisioned. You know, he was thinking it was going to be the land of milk and honey and prosperity, but it's barren. No one's there. There's no prosperity, and he's really disappointed.
After just 2 weeks in California, Charlie packed up his bags and headed for another new American territory, Texas. A decision he would come to regret.
Charlie made a major error. He clearly didn't give California a chance.
He's impatient and he leaves at the worst possible time.
In 1848, the California Gold Rush began.
As news spreads of the gold rush, then so too does gold fever. And gold fever spreads across America, it spreads throughout the globe. There is a mania to get to California. And as far as everyone's concerned, every second counts. It's not just getting there, but it's getting there quickly, it's getting there near to first as you possibly can to get the easiest and the richest pickings.
In 1849 alone, more than 50,000 people crossed America in search of gold.
Suddenly, everyone wants to be in California. People from China, from Europe, from Australia, from South America, all are fixating on getting to California. That's the one goal.
When Charlie heard about the gold discoveries, he was 1,600 miles away in Texas.
Charlie would have been absolutely kicking himself when he found out about the discovery of gold in California. He could have been in on it. He could have been one of those who made incredible riches.
He hears about it in Texas at the same time that everyone else is hearing about it. He's lost any advantage he may have gained by being in California in those earliest days of the gold rush. Now he has to do what everyone else is doing, which is get back to California as quickly as possible.
And so Charlie set off for the West once again.
As Charlie heads to California for the second time, he is fraught with anxiety. He wants to get the gold, and every hour he's not in California, someone else is mining the gold that should be his. Charlie's second journey to California was nothing like his first, which was him alone. The second time, there are hundreds and even thousands of people doing the same thing he is. So it's almost like a super highway, not so much the speed, but the fact that there's so many people making the same journey that he is on.
And when Charlie arrived in California, it had been transformed.
It's completely unrecognizable. He can't believe his eyes. It's like nothing that he remembers the first time.
Whereas previously it had been relatively empty, unpopulated, Now, all of a sudden, this was a bustling, anarchic place with a large and dynamic and ever-expanding population. It was suddenly a place where everything seemed to be happening.
When Charlie arrives, I mean, he essentially arrives in the most exciting point in the most exciting country in the world at this moment. He's really arrived at the place in the world that is the centre of the action.
In this frenzy, Charlie wasted no time staking his claim.
If you wanted to stake a claim, you had to do it physically. You had to literally go and drive a stake into the ground and defend your turf.
At first, Charlie's luck was in. He found what he'd come for.
So Charlie must have felt absolutely elated the first time he found gold. It was his dream since he set out from Texas, but he had this fear that it would be all gone by the time he got there. But it wasn't. He found some.
But after this initial small success, it seems Charlie's luck ran out.
After the easy pickings are gone, Charlie, like many other miners, is faced with the fact that getting hold of other gold remains in the ground is going to be much harder work. You're going to need more equipment, you're going to have to invest heavily in whatever claim that you have. Obviously, none of that came cheap. Shopkeepers are price gouging as hard and as fast as they can. There is a limited supply of the things that are necessary for life, whether it's food, whether it's shovels, and so shopkeepers charge what they like.
But Charlie would not give up his quest for gold. He was in the grip of gold fever.
A kind of madness to possess some of these people. Especially if, like Charlie, you have one stroke of luck early on, then like a gambler, you want more and you want more.
But Charlie's losing streak continued.
As more and more people make their way to California, competition increases, the struggle for land, for good claims increases, and so Charlie's chances of really finding gold, of really striking it rich, get less and less every year.
Charlie found himself in a desperate situation.
The dark side of the expectations and the hopes and the dreams of the gold rush is the crushing bitterness and the disappointment.
By 1855, the Californian gold rush was largely over. After 6 years of trying, Charlie had failed to make his fortune.
Charlie's experience of the gold rush is very common. Very few people, very, very few people achieved this fantastical dream of sudden wealth. The people who made money from the gold rush were the merchants, the people selling equipment, the people providing services, the people supplying food.
In 1862, news broke of gold discoveries in neighboring Arizona. Charlie headed south to try again. His route took him back across the lands of the Cahuilla tribe that he traveled through 5 years earlier. And it seems his mind turned back to the incredible story of the ship stranded in the desert he'd heard all those years ago. Could the Native American story be more than a myth?
The idea of a ship getting lost in the desert seems like a fantasy, seems like a folklore tale or a myth, but the reality is it can happen.
The Kauai story suggested this area of the desert was once covered in water. In fact, this was true, and it was called Lake Kauai.
The Native American myths actually oftentimes relate to real historical events. It's entirely possible that the myth of the bird could relate to not only a real historical event, but that event could be the creation and evaporation, and the creation and evaporation of Lake Kauai.
Lake Kauai was tremendously important for all the Native Americans in the area. It was a lifeblood. It's how they basically lived. They needed the water in order to survive. There's remnants of the old shoreline all over the desert.
Geological studies have shown that since around 700 AD, the Colorado River has filled an area called the Salton Sink many times, forming Lake Kauai. Each time, the lake would eventually evaporate, returning the area to desert once more. But it's thought that at times, the lake wasn't just an isolated stretch of water. In the years Lake Kauai was full, some experts believe that when the Colorado River was in flood, it formed a link between lake and sea.
There is scientific proof out there that the waters can actually connect to Lake Kauai, and it's easily possible for a ship to get up into that particular area.
But any ship that found its way into the lake would soon have been left high and dry.
Once the ship would have entered Lake Kauai, the receding waters would not allow the ship to leave the area.
If that was so, there really could be a ship in the desert. And it could still be out there. In September 1870, Charlie was now in Southern California, still hunting for good pay dirt. When, the story goes, he picked up a copy of his local newspaper, the San Bernardino Guardian. While scanning the pages, a small article caught his eye. It told of a ship that had been spotted out in the desert.
A party of Americans found embedded in the sands the wreck of a large vessel.
He must have been flabbergasted. He's thinking, ha, I knew it, see? It does exist.
Nearly 1/3 of the ship is plainly visible.
You can imagine his eyes just popping out of his head as he reads this.
The description made it sound like a ship worth finding.
The stump of the bowsprit remains, and portions of the timbers of teak are perfect.
He's seeing dollar signs because the ship sounds like it's big, and he knows that a big ship is always carrying cargo.
And Charlie started to wonder what sort of cargo it was carrying. At the time, speculation was rife that the wreck was a lost pirate ship. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, the Gulf of California was teeming with Spanish ships. Here, enterprising pirates preyed on mighty galleons, carrying priceless treasures from all over Asia back home to Spain.
Oh, it's laden with gold, it's got silver bars, it's got jewels, black pearls, it's got everything under the sun.
The newspaper article even told Charlie where to look. The ship lay just under 70 miles away, 40 miles north of the San Bernardino-Fort Yuma Road and 30 miles west of Dos Palmas.
Charlie wanted to set out for the ship as soon as possible because it's been published. Now he knows he's not the only one who wants to find the cargo. There's going to be competition, and he doesn't want to be second on the scene like in the gold rush.
Charlie started preparing to head into one of the harshest environments on Earth.
Crossing the desert in Charlie's time would have been a tremendous undertaking. You can go for days without seeing a soul. It's a forbidding place, that's for sure. If you're not properly prepared and you head out to the desert, you will die, period. The expedition is very, very risky. You would face death almost on a daily basis.
There were several things that were out there that could threaten his life. Coyotes, wolves, snakes. There's other miners, Mexicans coming up from the border. You had the local Native Americans.
There are no settlements. There's no support crew. There's nowhere else for him to turn. Charlie had to take with him everything he thought he was going to need.
Dry foods, a jerky type of meat, beans, bacon, anything he could get his hands on that would get him through the day. He would have to really be very cautious about what he took, how much he took of it, and why he was taking it.
Charlie knew there was one thing he needed to take above all else: water.
The desert out in that area can reach temperatures of 120 to 125 degrees, and then that's in the shade.
The water points out in the desert are not something you can get to within a day.
The lack of water for him or his animals would mean he would be stranded out there, and if his animals went without water, he would have a long walk to get back to some water source, which would have meant surely probably death.
This is not something for the average Joe that would be working in San Bernardino.
But Charlie wasn't your average Joe.
Whether in his childhood or more recently during his military service, Charlie would have been used to living in wild areas of one form or another. He would have significant experience of using firearms, so that would have been extremely useful when it came to protecting himself and possibly even finding food. So Charlie had survival skills.
But finding the ship was such a massive undertaking that Charlie felt he needed help.
Charlie could have done it by himself, but I think it makes a lot more sense to go out in a party. You could easily make one mistake and die on your own. So people or a group of adventurers or travelers was highly important.
He probably didn't have that much trouble finding people that were interested in going out looking for the ship. I'm sure he probably had people that were volunteering to go with him.
On the 1st of October 1870, Charlie's team set out. At first, they followed a route he knew well. This was the trail he had taken to try his luck in the Arizona goldfields in the early 1860s. From San Bernardino, they followed the old Bradshaw Road, working their way through the San Gorgonio Pass and down the Coachella Valley to Martinez. But soon they would find themselves in totally uncharted territory.
Charlie wouldn't have had a map. Finding his way was going to be a difficult task.
The Mojave Desert is one of the most difficult places to navigate, especially in Charlie's time. You can look out on the desert and what may appear to be a mile or two actually be 30, 40 miles. So at first you may think, not a problem. But the reality of the situation is when you get out there, it's a whole new ballgame. Most of their traveling was done with what we call dead reckoning. They would look for certain objects or certain places that they would remember, and they would know at this particular rock grouping we would turn left. But then if you're in a place where you don't know where you are, you can get lost very quickly.
But after days of struggling to find their way, Charlie was sure they were getting close to the ship's location.
Charlie must have been so excited when he realizes he's only 10 miles away from the ship's reported location, and there's a chance they can make it there by nightfall.
Then, something happened that filled Charlie with panic.
Charlie sees that the tracks that he's making are starting to fill up with water.
And he realizes that he's standing in quicksand. It was really a horrific situation for Charlie. He's in the middle of nowhere and his horse is disappearing into the sand. He's gonna lose his horse, he's gonna lose everything, he's gonna die. He has to pull the horse out and it's screaming and the hair is being ripped off its legs. And it's signaled to Charlie, this is too dangerous to go on, he must retreat.
Charlie returned to San Bernardino. Despite his narrow escape, he started planning his next expedition immediately. Even though his companions were less than enthusiastic about returning to the desert, Charlie couldn't wait to head back out there.
It's the prospector mentality he has that failure's part of the job and he needs to persevere. Only next time he needs to be even more prepared.
This time Charlie was determined he would not fail. He gathered together as many wooden planks as he could get his hands on to help him cross any challenging ground. Just 3 weeks later, on the 5th of November 1870, Charlie set out into the desert once more. He was certain he would find the ship. He even took a different route to avoid the quicksand that had foiled his first attempt. But it wasn't long before Charlie was in trouble again.
It seems that Charlie is so preoccupied with the horrific experience with the quicksand that this time he's forgotten to bring the basics.
First, his food supplies ran out.
If you're out on the desert and you run out of food, you're pretty well doomed. Even if you were lucky, you could kill a rattlesnake and probably eat it. But there wasn't a lot to eat out on the floor of the desert in that area.
Despite his gnawing hunger, he plowed on towards where he was convinced the ship lay. Then, Charlie ran out of water.
Running out of water in the desert is huge. You're facing death. You gotta find water now, not tomorrow, not the next day, now.
You simply cannot survive these conditions without water, and Charlie, the very best, he's got a couple days left.
Even though he was still 30 miles away from the ship's reported location, Charlie didn't turn back for water. He carried on into the desert.
I think it'd be crazy, because when you're out in the desert and you're facing the possibility of dying because there's no water, and you're still focused in on a lost ship, oh, that's huge.
Then Charlie spotted something on the desert floor that told him he was getting close. These shells convinced him this area was once linked to the sea. Now, there was no way he was turning back.
After a couple days in the desert without water, keep in mind, it's 100 degrees plus every day. Charlie would have been in a really bad way.
Dehydration started to kick in.
Your muscles would start to ache. Your sense of direction would probably be off.
Diminished eyesight, tremendous headaches. the inability to be coherent. He was in a very serious, very bad state. He needed to get some sort of help or at least water as soon as possible.
Charlie realized he had to turn back.
Charlie would have been extremely frustrated. I mean, this is the second time I'm this close and I have to turn away. I bet that just irritated him to no end.
Utterly dejected, Charlie took one last look around. Suddenly, something on the horizon caught his eye. At first, he thought his eyes were deceiving him. But as he gazed through his telescope, he was convinced he could see the mast of a ship. And it wasn't just any ship. It was huge, about 250 feet long. A mighty Spanish galleon.
So when Charlie sees the ship, he would have been so excited. The story is true. The myth is true.
Charlie's location of the lost ship would make sense. In the area that he was talking about, the ancient shoreline for Lake Coahuila was right there. So it makes absolute sense that the ship could have been there.
Charlie was desperate to get to the ship. But by this stage, he was close to death.
Physically, he would have been completely drained. His body was done.
There's no way Charlie could have physically gone on. He sees the ship, he wants to go forward, but he has no choice but to retreat, for he had to go back or die.
But Charlie still wasn't defeated. When he arrived back in San Bernardino, his mind was already full of plans for his return.
Charlie was extremely determined to go back out, find the ship, and put the legend to rest.
Word of his adventures quickly spread.
The town would have been going crazy. Town would have been back and forth talking to everybody. Hey, did you hear the news? Oh my God, they found the ship.
When Charlie gets back to San Bernardino, he's like a rock star. So he becomes a bit of a local celebrity.
Joshua Talbot, the editor of the San Bernardino Guardian, was just about to go to press when Charlie returned. But he was anxious to report the local hero's amazing discovery.
It has all the elements that readers are looking for. It's a story of individual adventure. It's into a mysterious and essentially unknown part of California still. So it's romantic, it's exciting, and it also has the possibility of treasure at the end of it as well. So this is a story that's really almost tailor-made for the California market.
Talbot published, "The ship has been found," and promised his gripped readers a full account in next week's edition. But a rival newspaper beat Talbot to the scoop.
He's interviewed by the Alta California, which is really the premier newspaper. It's the newspaper with the biggest circulation in California at this time.
There was huge competition among newspaper editors to be the one who was first on a story, and Charlie's story was an extraordinary one and one that could sell newspapers.
Soon the story went national.
This story was picked up back east in the New York press, in the Cincinnati press, where Charlie came from.
Newspapers in Kansas, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, they run the story as well. So Charlie is becoming increasingly famous across America.
Charlie's story had become big business. Talbot couldn't afford to miss any more scoops. He decided he must join Charlie's next expedition.
This kind of first-person testimony that he's going to bring to it is really going to help to enliven the story and to really sell it to his readership. The San Bernardino Guardian is a relatively new newspaper as well at this point. It's founded in 1867, so you can imagine that this also seems like a good story to try and make the name of this newspaper on.
And Talbot's interest was potentially very valuable to Charlie.
I think it's very likely that the editor of the San Bernardino Guardian was paying Charlie for access, paying to, as it were, embed himself in Charlie's expedition in order to be the first on this story and to have exclusive access to interviews and to be there with Charlie when he makes this great discovery.
Whatever the case, it seems Charlie was much better funded for his third attempt to find the ship. This time Charlie had a wagon large enough to carry 108 gallons of water, food for 2 months, and he had another crew.
He's not leaving anything to chance. This will be the trip that he actually gets to the ship.
On the 30th of November 1870, they plunged into the desert.
Charlie's attitude when he sets out for the third expedition is one of defiance. There is no way he will be stopped. He has enough supplies for a small army, and he's determined to succeed at any cost.
To ensure he didn't run out of water on his latest campaign, Charlie had a new strategy that involved yet another route. He approached the ship from a rare water source in the desert, Carrizo Creek. But the terrain on this new approach was tough. Progress was slow.
There's small rolling hills, there's large mountains, there's deep depressions, it's sandy.
He would be lucky if he averaged 10 to 15 miles a day.
Worse, from this new angle, Charlie seemed to struggle to identify any of the landmarks he'd noted on his last mission that he needed to find his way back to the ship.
Landmarks change. Those sand berms have a tendency to move. You know, what could be under 40 feet of sand today could be barren tomorrow. The desert is a living, breathing thing.
Days turned into weeks, and Charlie still hadn't found the ship.
Talbot was expecting the ship to be found, expecting Charlie to say, here it is, this is where it's at, this is what we have, let's take a couple artifacts so we can prove that we actually found the ship and be done with it. But in reality, the desert takes a long time to explore. Talbot would have reacted to the desert in a very harsh way. As a newspaper man, not realizing what the trials and tribulations would be like out in the desert. I think a very short time out in the desert, he had enough.
You can imagine what Talbot is thinking as really every hour that goes by, he's losing more and more confidence in Charlie, he's losing more and more confidence in the story.
Eventually, after 20 days, Talbot abandoned the expedition. He had a newspaper to run. Charlie stayed out in the desert for a further 3 weeks, but he still couldn't find the ship. After 6 weeks, he too returned to San Bernardino, empty-handed.
So when the third expedition fails, like the first two, Charlie is absolutely gutted. He has spent 6 weeks. He has every supply he needs, but he returns without a single piece of evidence that the ship exists. Inevitably, the press loses interest in Charlie. Failures don't sell newspapers.
Utterly defeated, Charlie abandoned his quest for the lost ship of the desert. It all begs the question, if he had really seen it, why couldn't Charlie find the lost ship again?
In hindsight, you have to wonder, is there any way Charlie could have seen a ship on that second expedition that wasn't really there? And of course there is. The man is dehydrated. He's ready to die. He hasn't had water in days.
And when people are severely dehydrated, they can hallucinate. So, was Charlie hallucinating? There is another possible explanation. That Charlie really did see a ship, but it was a mirage.
The desert can play some very, very funny tricks on you. You may see something, you may swear it's there, and it's not there. It's simply called a mirage.
In contrast to a hallucination, which exists only in the mind, a mirage is a real optical phenomenon. Differences in air temperature cause light rays to refract, to form a false image. But interpreting what the false image is depends on the mind of its observer.
Charlie wanted so bad to see that ship that he just imagined something that wasn't there.
But Charlie had been adamant that what he'd seen was real.
They even asked him if it wasn't a mirage, if he was quite certain he had saw the ship. And he, without a doubt, verified that he had saw the ship, that he had a telescope that was of good quality, and he knows exactly what he saw.
There is another, more disturbing possibility. Back in his office, Talbot started to write up his adventures with Charlie. And he started to focus on some strange patterns in Charlie's behavior.
Talbot can't help but notice that Charlie doesn't appear to really be in a hurry. He's taking his time, he's looking around him, as though he's looking for something along the way, as opposed to having his eyes set on the ship off in the distance.
And that wasn't the only thing that struck Talbot as odd.
If he knew what it was, he'd go straight there. But every day he goes into a different direction. And this leaves Talbot to wonder, what is it that he's really looking for, the ship, or could it be something else?
In fact, Charlie's routes on each of his 3 expeditions seemed to make no sense. Talbot started to wonder, what was Charlie really up to? Each time he approached the ship from further and further away, searching a broader and broader area. And each time from different compass points. Talbot realized this wasn't the behavior of someone trying to find the ship's reported location. Perhaps Charlie wasn't really searching for the lost ship. Perhaps he was hunting for something much closer to his heart. Gold.
It would make sense that Charlie was looking for gold simply because old habits die hard.
It's in his blood. It's what he's done for decades now.
But if Charlie was really after gold, why claim to be searching for a lost ship? From his years of prospecting, Charlie knew there was one thing above all a miner needed to be successful: money.
Money for supplies, for tools, for everything he would need to stay in the desert for weeks to try to find the gold.
Charlie's problem was how to get the funds he needed.
Charlie's method for finding gold in the desert is really quite cunning.
For Charlie, the ship was potentially a means to an end. If he claimed to be hunting the legendary lost ship, Charlie was no longer just another prospector looking for financial backers. He was a hero.
Charlie would have wanted media attention, I imagine, because it would have been a way of raising money. If he can attract this kind of attention, then he can get people to invest in his expedition.
Everybody would have known that he was looking for the ship, so it would have been quite easy for him to get just about anything he needed in order to go on an expedition.
So was it all a tall tale to get money? Charlie was definitely a man who could spin a yarn.
He claims that he was playmates with Abraham Lincoln as a young boy, at a point when Lincoln was certainly nowhere near where Charlie Clusker was.
Whatever the truth, Charlie went on to live to a grand old age. He died in 1915, aged 105. A local tribute made no mention of his quest for the lost ship, but it did sum him up rather well.
Mr. Clusker was a typical prospector and miner. Sometimes he had wealth in hand. Always, he possessed wealth in prospect.
But does that mean there never was a ship in the desert? Over the years, many claim to have seen it.
In 1892 there was one, in 1907 there was one, in 1933 there was one, in 1944 there was one.
The puzzling thing is, all these people see different ships, including a Viking longboat, though how that might have got into the Californian desert, nobody can explain. And that's not the only problem with the numerous lost ship sightings.
Nobody seems to see the ship twice. They'll see it, get all excited, retreat, mount another expedition. They never see it again. And that's all symptomatic of the fact that it wasn't there in the first place. If the ship really exists, you'd be able to find it a second time, and you would surely be able to bring something back.
Despite all this, still, the legend lives on.
The legend of the lost ship has continued, will continue, and when all of us here are said and gone, it will still continue.
For some, there will always be a lost ship in the desert.
I absolutely think there's a lost ship out there, and I would love to find it.